The morning rush. Sarah Martinez had been wiping down tables at Danny's diner for 3 years, but today felt different. The morning sun streamed through the greasy windows, casting long shadows across the checkered linoleum floor. She tucked a strand of graying hair behind her ear and glanced at the clock. 6:30 a.m. The breakfast crowd would arrive soon, and she needed to be ready. The diner sat on the outskirts of a small military town where most people knew each other's business. Sarah had moved here after her husband died, seeking a fresh start for herself and her teenage daughter, Emily. The work was hard, the pay was small, but it was honest work that kept food on their table and a roof over their heads. As she arranged the salt and pepper shakers, Sarah's mind wandered to Emily, who was probably still sleeping before school. Her daughter was brilliant with dreams of becoming a doctor. Sarah worked double shifts whenever possible, saving every penny for Emily's college fund. The tips weren't much, but they added up, and Sarah was determined to give her daughter opportunities she never had. The first customer of the day walked in, a gruff man in work boots who barely looked up from his phone. "Coffee black," he mumbled, settling into a corner booth. Sarah smiled warmly despite his cold demeanor. She had learned long ago that kindness was free, even when it wasn't returned. "Coming right up, sir. Would you like to see a menu?" He shook his head without looking at her. This was typical. To most customers, Sarah was invisible, just another waitress in a small-town diner. They didn't know that she had once been a decorated Army medic, serving 2 tours in Afghanistan before an injury ended her military career. They didn't know about the medals tucked away in a box under her bed, or the lives she had saved in combat zones. The morning rush began in earnest as construction workers, truck drivers, and office employees filed in. Sarah moved between tables with practiced efficiency, taking orders, refilling coffee cups, and clearing dishes. Her feet ached in the worn sneakers she couldn't afford to replace, but she kept smiling. At table 6, a young mother struggled with 2 crying toddlers while trying to order breakfast. Sarah brought over crayons and coloring sheets she kept behind the counter. "Here you go, sweethearts," she said to the children, then quietly told the mother, "Take your time. I know how hard it can be." The woman's eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you so much. You're an angel." Sarah just smiled and moved to the next table, where an elderly veteran sat alone, staring out the window. He came in every Tuesday, always ordering the same thing: 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, and black coffee. Sarah had noticed the Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm, and the way he sometimes seemed lost in memories. "Morning, Mr. Peterson. The usual today?" He nodded, then looked up at her with tired eyes. "You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone brave." Sarah felt a flutter in her chest, but kept her voice steady. "Just doing my job, sir." As the morning wore on, Sarah overheard conversations at various tables: business deals, family problems, local gossip. She was part of the background, invisible, but always listening. At table 12, 2 men in expensive suits complained loudly about the service while she was clearly within earshot. "This place is a dump," one said, "and the waitress looks like she's been here since the Stone Age." His companion laughed. "What do you expect? It's just a diner. These people don't have any real skills or they'd be doing something else." Sarah's cheeks burned, but she continued wiping tables. She had heard worse over the years. People often made assumptions about service workers, never imagining the stories behind the uniforms. They saw a middle-aged waitress and assumed that was all she had ever been, all she would ever be. During her break, Sarah stepped outside into the cool morning air. She pulled out her phone and saw a text from Emily. "Mom, I got accepted to the pre-med program. They want to interview me for a scholarship next week." Sarah's heart soared. All those double shifts, all the aching feet and rude customers. It was all worth it for moments like this. She quickly typed back, "I'm so proud of you, mija. You're going to be an amazing doctor." Back inside, the lunch crowd was starting to arrive. Sarah noticed a group of men in casual clothes taking a large table near the back. Something about their bearing, the way they sat and scanned the room, reminded her of her military days. They were probably from the nearby base, she thought, though they weren't in uniform. As she approached their table with menus, she caught fragments of their conversation. They were discussing a training exercise, using terms that made Sarah's pulse quicken with recognition. These weren't just any soldiers. The way they spoke, their obvious camaraderie and shared experiences, suggested they were special operations. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. What can I get you to drink?" The man who appeared to be their leader, a tall African-American man with kind eyes and graying temples, smiled at her. "Coffee all around, ma'am, if you don't mind, and thank you." There was something different about the way he spoke to her, a respect in his voice that Sarah rarely heard from customers. She brought the coffee and took their orders, noticing how politely they all treated her. When one of them accidentally knocked over the sugar dispenser, he immediately apologized and helped clean it up. "Please don't worry about it," Sarah said. "Happens all the time." "Still sorry, ma'am. My mother raised me better than that." As Sarah walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to these men than met the eye. And little did she know that they were thinking the same thing about her. The way she moved, her attention to detail, something indefinable about her presence suggested a background they recognized. The lunch rush continued, with Sarah moving efficiently between tables. She noticed the group of men watching her work, but not in the leering way she sometimes encountered. Their observation seemed respectful, almost appraising. When she brought their food, the leader spoke again. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, were you military?" Sarah paused, surprised by the directness of the question. "A long time ago, Army medic." The men exchanged glances. "What unit?" asked another man, this one with a slight southern accent. 68th Medical Company. Served in Afghanistan." The respect in their eyes deepened visibly. "Thank you for your service, ma'am." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest, but she deflected with humor. "That's kind of you, but right now I'm just trying to keep your coffee cups full." After they left, Sarah found a $20 tip on a $30 check, far more than necessary. Tucked under the bill was a business card with just a name and phone number. On the back, someone had written, "Some service never ends." The afternoon shift brought its usual challenges. A difficult customer complained about everything from the temperature of his soup to the speed of the service. He became increasingly belligerent, eventually raising his voice and using language that made other customers uncomfortable. "This is the worst service I've ever experienced." "Do you even know what you're doing?" Sarah remained calm and professional, but inside, her military training was kicking in. She had faced down enemy fire and treated wounded soldiers under pressure. One angry customer wasn't going to break her. The day ended as it began, with Sarah wiping down tables and preparing for the evening shift worker. Her feet throbbed, her back ached, and she smelled like grease and coffee. But in her pocket was Emily's acceptance letter, which she had printed and carried with her like a talisman. As she untied her apron, Sarah thought about the group of military men who had treated her with such respect. It had been a long time since someone had acknowledged her service, and their recognition meant more than they could know. In a world where she often felt invisible, they had seen her as a person, as someone who mattered. Little did Sarah know that their brief encounter would set in motion events that would change her life forever. The men she had served weren't just any military personnel. They were Navy SEALs, and they had recognized something in her that went far beyond her role as a waitress. Their story was just beginning, and Sarah Martinez was about to discover that some forms of service are never truly forgotten. The investigation Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison couldn't stop thinking about the waitress from Danny's diner. Something about Sarah Martinez had triggered his instincts, honed by 15 years in special operations. The way she carried herself, her situational awareness, the calm professionalism under pressure when dealing with that difficult customer, it all pointed to military experience far beyond what a typical Army medic might possess. Back at the Naval Special Warfare Base, Jake gathered his team in the briefing room. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Williams, Operations Specialist Tommy Chen, and Senior Chief David Tank Rodriguez had all noticed the same things about Sarah during their lunch. "I'm telling you guys, there was something about her," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. "The way she assessed the room when she walked in, how she positioned herself to keep an eye on all the exits. That's not standard medic training." Tommy nodded in agreement. "And did you see how she handled that angry customer? Most people would have been rattled, but she stayed completely composed. That's someone who's been in real situations before." Jake had been doing some digging since they returned from lunch. Military records weren't easy to access, but his position gave him certain privileges. What he found in Sarah Martinez's file made his blood run cold. "Guys, you need to see this." He pulled up Sarah's service record on the secure terminal. "Sergeant First Class Sarah Elena Martinez, 68th Medical Company." But that's not the whole story. The file revealed that Sarah had been specially assigned to provide medical support for classified operations. She had worked alongside special operations teams, including Navy SEALs, in some of the most dangerous regions of Afghanistan. Her medical skills had saved countless lives, including several members of SEAL Team 6. "Look at this," Jake continued, scrolling through her commendations. "Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart, Combat Medical Badge, and this one here." He paused at a classified commendation. "Presidential Unit Citation for actions during Operation Neptune's Spear." Tank let out a low whistle. "She was there? During the Bin Laden raid?" "Not directly involved in the raid itself, but she was part of the medical support team that treated the wounded when they came back. She's the medic who saved Lieutenant Commander Anderson's life when his chopper went down 3 days after the main operation." The room fell silent. They all knew Anderson, a legendary SEAL who had died years later in a training accident. His survival from that helicopter crash had allowed him to complete several more critical missions and train dozens of young SEALs. "There's more," Jake said grimly. "She was medically retired after an IED explosion during her second tour. Shrapnel in her back and legs. She could have claimed full disability, but she only took partial benefits and refused to file for compensation for her injuries." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "And now she's working as a waitress, getting treated like garbage by people who have no idea what she's done for this country." The team sat in contemplative silence. They had all encountered heroes who had fallen through the cracks, veterans whose service was forgotten or overlooked. But this felt different. Sarah Martinez wasn't just any veteran struggling to make ends meet. She was a genuine war hero whose actions had directly saved the lives of men they knew and respected. "I want to do something about this," Jake announced, "but we need to be smart about it. We can't just walk up to her and start talking about classified operations." Over the next few days, the team began making regular stops at Danny's diner. They came in civilian clothes during different shifts, learning more about Sarah's situation. They discovered that she was raising a daughter alone, working multiple jobs to save for college tuition. They learned about her quiet acts of kindness, how she often paid for meals for homeless veterans who wandered in, how she stayed late to help elderly customers who had fallen, how she never complained despite the long hours and difficult customers. Tommy, who was excellent with computers, did some additional research. He found records showing that Emily Martinez was indeed accepted into several pre-med programs, but was struggling with financial aid. Despite her mother's military service, they had somehow fallen through the cracks of various veteran assistance programs. "This is ridiculous," Tommy said during one of their team meetings. "Her daughter qualifies for military-dependent education benefits, but apparently no one ever told them about it. And Sarah herself is eligible for vocational rehabilitation that could help her get better employment." Jake was getting angrier by the day. "So she's working herself to death because the system failed her, the same system she nearly died protecting." The turning point came on a Thursday afternoon. The team was having lunch at the diner when they witnessed an incident that would galvanize them into action. A group of businessmen at a nearby table were complaining loudly about their service, despite Sarah bending over backward to accommodate their constant demands for modifications to their orders. "This place is pathetic," one of them said loudly enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "Look at this waitress. She's probably been doing this job her whole life because she's too stupid to do anything else." His companion laughed cruelly. "What do you expect from these people? They're basically servants. They exist to bring us food and clean up after us." Sarah continued working professionally, but Jake could see the hurt in her eyes. What these men didn't know was that they were insulting someone who had shown more courage in a single day than they would in their entire lives. Marcus started to stand up, his face flushed with anger, but Jake put a restraining hand on his arm. "Not here, not now. But we're going to fix this." That evening, Jake made a series of phone calls. His first call was to Admiral Richardson, the commander of Naval Special Warfare Command. Jake had served under Richardson for years and knew he could trust him with this sensitive situation. "Admiral, I need to tell you about someone special, and I need your help." Jake explained Sarah's situation, her service record, and what she meant to the special operations community. Admiral Richardson listened in growing amazement. "You're telling me that Sergeant Martinez is working as a waitress? The same medic who saved half of SEAL Team 6 during her deployments?" "Yes, sir. And she's being treated like she's nobody. Her daughter is academically qualified for the Naval Academy prep program, but they don't even know it exists. This is unacceptable. Lieutenant Commander, what do you need from me?" Jake outlined his plan. It was ambitious, maybe even a little crazy, but it would ensure that Sarah Martinez received the recognition she deserved. More importantly, it would secure her daughter's future and give Sarah the opportunities she had earned through her service and sacrifice. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Jake worked with the Admiral's office to coordinate what they were calling Operation Recognition. They reached out to veterans organizations, military support groups, and media contacts. The story of Sarah Martinez began to spread through military circles, generating outrage and admiration in equal measure. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her daily routine, unaware of the storm building around her. She served coffee, took orders, and saved every penny for Emily's education. The group of military men continued to visit regularly, always polite and respectful, but she had no idea they were orchestrating something that would change her life. Emily's scholarship interview was scheduled for the following month, and Sarah had requested time off to drive her daughter to the university. It would mean lost wages, but Sarah would do anything to support Emily's dreams. She had even picked up extra shifts at a second diner across town to make up for the lost income. One morning, as Sarah was preparing for another busy day, she noticed that Danny's diner seemed different. The regular customers were there, but there were also some new faces, men and women in neat civilian clothes who carried themselves with military bearing. They spoke quietly among themselves and kept glancing in her direction. The manager, Mr. Danny Kowalski, seemed nervous and excited at the same time. He kept checking his watch and smoothing his hair. When Sarah asked him what was going on, he just smiled mysteriously and told her to focus on her work. "Just make sure you give everyone your best service today, Sarah. It's going to be a special day." Sarah shrugged and tied on her apron. Every day was special when you were working for your daughter's future. She had no idea that across town, buses were arriving at the military base, carrying some of the most decorated soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in the country. They were coming for her, to honor her, to right a wrong that had been ignored for too long. The second phase of Sarah's story was about to begin, and this time, she wouldn't be invisible. This time, she would be seen for exactly who she was, a hero who had never stopped serving her country, even when her country had forgotten about her. The recognition. The morning of what would become known as Sarah's Day started like any other at Danny's diner. Sarah arrived at 5:30 a.m. to find the parking lot unusually full for such an early hour. She noticed several vehicles with military base stickers and a few news vans parked discreetly across the street. Something was definitely happening, but she couldn't figure out what. Inside, the diner buzzed with an energy Sarah had never felt before. Every table was occupied, and there was a line of people waiting outside. Mr. Kowalski was beaming like he'd won the lottery, and the cook, usually grumpy in the mornings, was whistling while he worked. "Sarah, I need you to work the main dining room today," Mr. Kowalski said, his voice trembling with excitement. "We've got some very special customers coming in." As Sarah tied on her apron, she noticed familiar faces among the crowd. The group of military men who had been regular customers were there, but now they were joined by dozens of others. Men and women of various ages, all carrying themselves with the unmistakable bearing of military service. Some wore dress uniforms, others were in civilian clothes, but all of them seemed to be waiting for something. At exactly 10:00 a.m., the door chimed as more people entered. Sarah looked up from pouring coffee to see Admiral Richardson in full dress uniform, accompanied by several high-ranking officers from different branches of the military. The entire diner fell silent. Behind the Admiral walked Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, now also in dress blues, carrying a wooden presentation case. Sarah's heart began to race as she realized that all eyes in the restaurant were on her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Richardson announced, his voice carrying easily through the hushed diner. "Today we gather to honor someone who has served our nation with extraordinary courage and distinction. Someone who has been overlooked for far too long." Sarah stood frozen, coffee pot still in her hand, as the Admiral approached her. "Sergeant First Class Sarah Elena Martinez. Would you please step forward?" The room seemed to spin as Sarah set down the coffee pot with shaking hands. Every person in the diner was looking at her, and she could see news cameras positioned near the windows. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of mistake. "Sir, I think there's been some confusion," Sarah said quietly. "I'm just a waitress." Admiral Richardson smiled kindly. "Ma'am, you are many things, but just a waitress is not one of them. You are a decorated combat veteran, a Bronze Star recipient, and a hero to every person in this room." Jake stepped forward and began to read from an official document. "Sergeant First Class Martinez served with distinction in Afghanistan, where her medical expertise and courage under fire saved countless lives. During Operation Neptune's Spear and subsequent classified missions, her actions directly contributed to the success of critical special operations and the survival of multiple Navy SEAL team members." The room erupted in applause as the military personnel present began to stand. Sarah's knees nearly gave out as she realized what was happening. These weren't just random soldiers and sailors. These were men and women whose lives she had touched, whose friends she had saved, whose community she had served. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Williams stepped forward, his eyes bright with emotion. "Ma'am, you saved my team leader's life in 2011. Lieutenant Commander Anderson wrote about you in his after-action report. He said you performed surgery under enemy fire to remove shrapnel from his spine. Because of you, he lived to serve 8 more years and train hundreds of young SEALs." Another voice called out from the crowd. "You treated my unit after the IED attack near Kandahar. You worked on us for 6 hours straight, refusing to take a break even though you were injured yourself." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as more voices joined in, each sharing a story of how her medical skills and dedication had impacted their lives, or the lives of their comrades. She had known her service mattered, but she had never fully understood the ripple effect of her actions. Admiral Richardson opened the presentation case Jake had been carrying. Inside was a medal Sarah had never seen before, along with an official citation. By order of the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense, Sergeant First Class Sarah Martinez is hereby awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism in action against an enemy of the United States. The citation detailed actions Sarah barely remembered. Moments when instinct and training had taken over during the chaos of combat. It described how she had repeatedly exposed herself to enemy fire to treat wounded soldiers, how she had improvised life-saving medical procedures with limited supplies, and how her calm leadership under pressure had saved lives when other medical personnel had been killed or wounded. But the surprises weren't over. Jake stepped forward again, this time carrying an envelope. "Ma'am, there's something else. Your daughter Emily has been awarded a full scholarship to the United States Naval Academy with guaranteed placement in their pre-med program. Additionally, you have been offered a position as a senior instructor at the Navy's Field Medical Service School, where you will train the next generation of combat medics." Sarah's legs finally gave out, and she sank into a nearby chair as the full weight of what was happening hit her. The room erupted in cheers and applause as every military member present snapped to attention and delivered a crisp salute. Through her tears, Sarah could see faces in the crowd she recognized from her deployment days. Soldiers she had treated, officers she had worked with, and families of men and women who hadn't made it home. They had all come to honor her, to thank her, to show her that her service had never been forgotten. Mr. Kowalski appeared at her side with a tissue, his own eyes wet with tears. "Sarah, I had no idea. All this time I've had a genuine American hero working in my diner, and I treated you like just another employee. I'm so sorry." Sarah looked up at him and smiled through her tears. "Mr. K, you gave me a job when I needed one. You treated me with dignity and respect. You have nothing to apologize for." The ceremony continued as various military leaders presented Sarah with certificates, letters of appreciation, and commitments for ongoing support. Veterans organizations had come together to establish a scholarship fund in her name. The American Legion was presenting her with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Local businesses had donated money to help her transition to her new career. But perhaps the most touching moment came when a young Navy corpsman approached her. He couldn't have been more than 20 years old, and his hands were shaking as he spoke. "Ma'am, my name is Hospital Corpsman 3rd Class Rodriguez. I'm about to deploy to Syria as part of a special operations support team. When I heard your story, I realized I wanted to serve like you did. Would you mind signing my field medical handbook?" Sarah took the young man's handbook and wrote a simple inscription. "Take care of them like they're your family because they are. SFC Martinez." As the formal ceremony wound down, people began to approach Sarah individually. Some wanted to share stories. Others simply wanted to shake her hand and say thank you. Emily arrived, having been secretly coordinated by Jake's team, and mother and daughter embraced as the crowd applauded. "Mom, I can't believe this is happening," Emily whispered. "I always knew you were a hero, but I never imagined—" "Mija, I just did my job. These people, they're the real heroes." Admiral Richardson overheard and approached them. "Ms. Martinez, with respect, that's exactly the kind of thinking that allowed your service to go unrecognized for so long. Heroism isn't about seeking glory. It's about doing the right thing when it matters most, regardless of personal cost. That's exactly what you did, and that's exactly what you continue to do every day." The local news crews were respectful but eager for interviews. Sarah, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened, spoke briefly about her gratitude for the recognition and her excitement about returning to service in a new capacity. "I never expected anything like this," she told the reporter. "I served because it was my duty, and I worked here because I needed to support my daughter, But now I have the chance to train young medics who will save lives just like I tried to do. It's more than I ever dreamed possible. As the crowd began to thin out, Jake approached Sarah one final time. "Ma'am, I hope you understand why we did this. It wasn't just about recognition, though you certainly deserve that. It was about making sure the country knows that heroes come in all forms, and sometimes they're serving coffee instead of receiving medals." Sarah nodded, finally beginning to process everything that had happened. "Commander Morrison, how did you know? How did you figure out who I was?" Jake smiled. "Ma'am, once a warrior, always a warrior. You can't hide that kind of training and experience. The way you carry yourself, the way you handle pressure, the way you care for people, it's unmistakable to those who know what to look for." That evening, as Sarah sat in her small apartment with Emily, they watched the news coverage of the day's events. The story had gone national, with headlines reading, "Forgotten Hero Found Working as Waitress," and "Navy SEALs Honor the Medic Who Saved Their Lives." Social media exploded with support for Sarah, with veterans from around the country sharing their own stories of unrecognized service members. The hashtag #ThankYouSarah trended nationwide as people celebrated not just her story, but the stories of all the invisible veterans who serve in quiet ways after their military careers end. A week later, Sarah worked her final shift at Danny's diner. The regular customers came by throughout the day to say goodbye and wish her well. Even the businessman who had insulted her weeks earlier showed up to apologize, having seen the news coverage and realized exactly who he had been speaking to. "Ma'am, I owe you a tremendous apology," he said, his face red with embarrassment. "I said some terrible things, and I had no idea who you were or what you had done for our country." Sarah graciously accepted his apology, just as she had graciously accepted every insult and slight over the years. "Sir, you don't need to apologize. You didn't know, and I wasn't serving for recognition anyway." As she untied her apron for the last time, Sarah reflected on the incredible turn her life had taken. In just a few weeks, she would begin her new position training combat medics, sharing her knowledge and experience with the next generation of military medical personnel. Emily would start her journey toward becoming a doctor, with her education fully funded and her future secured. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah's story had reminded the nation that heroes often hide in plain sight, that service doesn't end when the uniform comes off, and that sometimes the most powerful recognition comes not from seeking glory, but from simply doing what's right. The diner would always hold a special place in Sarah's heart, not just for the job it provided during difficult times, but for the reminder it gave her that dignity and purpose can be found in any honest work. She had served her country as a soldier and continued to serve her community as a waitress. Now she would serve future generations as a teacher and mentor. As she walked out of Danny's diner for the last time, Sarah Martinez wasn't just a former waitress heading to a new job. She was a recognized hero ready to make sure that the next generation of combat medics would be as prepared as possible to save lives and serve with honor. Her story had come full circle, from service member to civilian to honored veteran, proving that true heroes never really stop serving. They just find new ways to make a difference.